Hi, my name is Cheryl Copson, and I am the collections technician for the Egyptian, Nubian, and Middle Eastern collections here at the Royal Ontario Museum. So I'm in charge of the physical care of the collection, so anything that has to do with an object moving, an object needing conservation, or cataloging, or research, I'm in charge of coordinating that and caring for that. So on a daily basis, I am running around, either at my desk doing database work, doing some photography, cleaning out drawers, taking things down to be treated by conservation, taking things down to our photo studio for official ROM photography, liaising with researchers coming in, helping them get objects out, look at objects. We have people coming from around the world to see our collections. And then supervising volunteers as well is a huge part. We have 9 active volunteers in the department right now. And they do a range of cataloging, photography, assisting me with moving things, because sometimes you need 2 people. And yeah, that's the majority of my job, but then here and there it's whatever needs to get done.
It sounds like no 2 days are the same.
No 2 days are the same. No.
And so what brought you into museum work?
So I started my career path wanting to be an archaeologist.
Okay.
So I went to Boston University and got my undergrad in archaeology. Through that process, we did a field school, which was fantastic. So I dug in Spain on the island of Menorca, and we did 6 weeks of digging, but they actually didn't have enough, so they had finished the field season. And so the last week or so, we were also putting together a museum exhibition on the site in the town. And so through that process I realized, hey, that's interesting. I was like, I kind of like objects. And in archaeology you get some objects depending on where you're digging, but that's not your purpose and that's not why you're digging. And I realized that I enjoyed the story behind the object, the personal connection of someone crafted this in history and now it appears 2,000 years later and we're also touching this object. So I did a little exploring, and I realized that you could become a museum collections manager, and I didn't know that a job existed in the past. And so ended up at U of T at their Museum Studies program, and through some volunteering at different museums, ended up here volunteering, and I volunteered at the ROM for 3 years in the anthropology department. And the contract position came up, ended up getting selected for that. And then my current position came up and ended up getting selected for that. So it was kind of a domino effect.
It seems to me like being a collections manager for the Egyptian collection is sort of a dream come true for any museum dork.
Yes.
And yes. I say museum dork with affection, as you know.
Yeah, my first love when I was in early high school was Egypt, as most kids are, but I realized that everyone loved Egypt, so I was like, I need to separate myself and go down a different path so in the future I can actually get a job, but it's kind of come full circle and led me back to Egypt. So that's wonderful.
That is wonderful.
And the best part about both the Egyptian collection and the Middle Eastern collections, for myself anyways, is that they're actually primarily archaeological. So the history, the ROM has a long history of archaeological excavations, and a lot of that material ended up in the West Asia department and the Egyptian department. So I get to use a lot of my archaeology background in this collection to deal with excavated potsherds and remains and site notes and site maps and that kind of material.
Wow, that sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
Are you working on any projects coming up?
So last year we had a little scare when we found a beetle in storage. So that resulted in us needing to treat about 10 cabinets worth of objects.
Just to clarify, this wasn't a scarab beetle that was part of the collection?
This is not a scarab beetle.
Okay.
This was a carpet beetle.
Okay.
Which is a little scarier than a scarab beetle and much smaller. And so some of the material could be frozen. So that stuff went right away, got frozen, came back up. We sorted through it, got it back into its cabinets. But there's been a cart full of material that couldn't be frozen. So it needed to go through a anoxic treatment, and that's taken a longer time. So we just got a few drawers back that have a mummy in them, and she was unwrapped way back in the history of U of T, actually. She was unwrapped. So she's actually she's in a few drawers. So those drawers need to get cleaned out to make sure there's no beetle casings anywhere. So that in the future, if someone finds a casing, they know it's a new casing and not potentially an old casing. So I'm doing that. We have a lot of incoming acquisitions right now because we got a new Islamic curator who came in January. And so she's been actively collecting some new Islamic art for the collection, for the Middle Eastern collection.
I can confirm that that is true.
So we've been working to process that, get it in, get it conditioned, treated, measured, cataloged. We'll talk with Stephanie about how to register it, how to do appraisals, get those donor deeds of gift out, and then get them into storage and numbered. So we're kind of midway through the process and a lot of that. And then, database work.
Database work.
Always database work.
Yeah.
So today's the day I sit at my desk and do my database work, which was a lovely Thursday activity. So that's what I've been doing today.
Can I just circle back to the beetle that you found?
Yes.
How was this discovered? Do you do routine inspections?
I try to. So obviously it's a big collection. The Egyptian collection is about 35,000 objects, and the Middle Eastern collection is about 80,000 objects that are accessioned. And that's 2 separate storage spaces. So my job requires me to pull objects for different people, look at different things, answer questions. So I'm generally going through different drawers on a regular basis. So as we do that, I check for infestation. When we were working with the material that we found the beetle in, we were doing a project to rehouse our textiles. So there was an active project going on where we were going through the drawers. So that's how we found it.
So you have a textile collection within your purview as well?
Yes, an archaeological
textiles. Yeah. Oh, interesting. And I was going to ask one more question, and I can't think of what it was. So you're talking about your projects.
Yeah.
I know what it was. So it sounds like in your day-to-day work, you liaise with a number of different constituents within and without the ROM.
Yes.
Did you want to just talk about, just touch on some of that relationship development or how that works?
Yeah.
I know that's a very big open question.
It is. In the ROM, because the ROM is so big, we obviously have multiple departments that work on very small or large portions of projects. So there's constantly, whether it's acquiring something, whether it's sending out a loan, whether it's putting on an exhibition, you have all of these different departments that come together and have to do bits and pieces of a project. So it works to be nice to people and be nice to your colleagues, because then you can get stuff done and accomplished. Also internally at the ROM, it's really great. We had a shabti that was being cataloged by one of our volunteers.
And something like this?
Something like that.
Not this one.
It wasn't that one. So it's made of a stone, and we didn't know what type of stone it was. So we asked a few people up in our department, and no one could really tell, so phoned up mineralogy downstairs in the basement and talked with Catherine Donnell and said, "Can you identify this stone for us?" And she was like, "Absolutely." So took it downstairs, and she's going to run some tests and identify a stone for us. So being in this kind of large institution is really helpful. So we can get stone identified. We've done DNA on some of our mummies, so that's been interesting.
Now, was that done in-house?
In-house.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so we have an ancient DNA lab, which started from the Blue Whale Project, but now has kind of evolved to do human DNA as well, and some ancient animal DNA.
Okay, excellent.
And then outside the ROM, we get a lot of inquiries about our collection. Mostly people find it through publications. Currently, with the move to digitizing the collection, a lot of people have found our collections through our online website as well. And we have scholars who request to come in to take a look at our collection a lot. So we have a scholar coming in a few weeks actually to study one of our mummies. And so she's going to actually re-articulate the skeleton and do some osteological study on it. And so that helps us because we don't have an in-house expert on that type of study, so she'll be able to pass on her notes to us, and she's working under the supervision of a professor at Western who will be able to kind of put the stamp on that her work is accurate and knowledgeable.
That's really interesting. It's almost like crowdsourcing
kind of
information, but obviously from experts in their area, and where we don't have the expert, but we have the resource for them to review.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting partnership.
Yeah.
Is it one that that you get often? You
Yes.
deal with a lot of scholars.
Yes,
Okay.
lots of scholars. The most recent one before this, we get a lot of just web inquiries, so we do a lot of stuff via email and photographs, because not everyone can obviously travel to Toronto to do their work, but we had a gentleman come from the UK to study a collection of our hand axes that he didn't actually know about until we had put them online. And so the majority of that collection is in the UK, but we, for whatever reason, have a very small subset of that material as well. So he came and spent 2 weeks going through about 600 ancient hand axes.
Wow.
Paleolithic hand axes. And so he's going to take that back, put all that info in with his current data set to make it a larger data set, and then eventually he's publishing, so we'll get some of that information as well.
And I have, I think, 2 or 3 more questions for you.
Yeah.
One, so you represent a number of different collecting areas. You mentioned
Yes.
Egypt, Nubia, and then some other
Middle East.
East.
Yeah.
So how many curators do you work with regularly?
So 3. Our department's quite between the 2 departments. So Egypt and Nubia is one department, and then the Middle East is the second department. So in Egypt and Nubia, we have 1 curator, and he's actually a Nubian specialist, but he is by default in charge of Egypt as well. And then on the Middle Eastern side, we have 1 ancient Mesopotamian curator, and we have 1 Islamic art and culture curator. So I work with 3 curators on a regular basis.
That's great. And you mentioned digitization. We've actually heard this. You're not the first person to mention it. And in fact, we've already discussed, we've already talked to Melissa Mulphy.
Yes.
How many images or objects are you striving to get online over this 5-year project? Does your section have a target?
My section does not have a target. We've been working, I think, slightly differently than some of the other departments in that on the Egyptian side, we have quite a few volunteers and research associates working with our department who are doing the cataloging for those material. And so we're trying to make the records as full as possible before they go online. And that's partially because they need to get cataloged anyways. And so to come back to kind of half do a record and then have to come back later doesn't really make sense. If you're doing the research, you might as well do the full research. So ours is a bit slower.
Okay.
But most of the material that we photographed for digitization came from our gallery. So that's been a huge push to get that stuff online and properly cataloged. One, so that the public has a bit more information and updated information. Our permanent gallery hasn't been redone since 1992. It was installed, so some things have changed in terms of scholarship. And so the updated information, it's much easier to do that online than it is as an actual label in the gallery. So that's been the focus there. And then on the Middle Eastern side, we're just starting to do some of the Syro-Palestine material, and then the Islamic material. Our new curator has been kind of spearheading getting the Islamic material online.
Wow, there's definitely some exciting projects coming up. Thank you very much, Cheryl.